And we're up, we're live. It's funny saying good afternoon. I usually do these in the morning. Hi, Deb. It's been quite nice having the morning to not be on and then be here with
Well,
you.
it's my absolute pleasure, Alex. I'm glad I could facilitate that for you.
Yes, thank you. So, for those that don't know Deb Morgan, and I want to share a little bit about why I've got you on and why I'm fascinated about what you do, because people are like, your podcast is called Financial Freedom with Alex Louise. What's this got to do with money? And I'm like, everything. Everything has to do with money. So, for those of you wondering why I'm talking to the real relationships expert and the stuff that we're going to talk about, it's because it really matters. Because I did the whole thing of got financially free at 32, and the rest of my life was a car crash. So I'm now very passionate when people say they want to sort their money out, that they sort the rest of their lives out at the same time. And Deb, you are one of the few relationship coaches who speaks my language, I'm going to say. I didn't do the work with you on relationships, but you do the kind of work that I did in the sense of dealing with relationships that don't work. And what I love about you is that you don't make people wrong. And there is a whole world out there in relationship coaching where men, especially, well, actually, I'm going to say men are bastards and narcissists and horrible and they abuse us. And there's this whole world out there that makes men wrong and makes women victims. And I'm just like, how is that helping anyone? But there's a whole industry in your industry that kind of seems to do that. It's become very popular to call people narcissists and make them wrong. I'm like, that's not helping anyone. And then there's a whole world of women being victims. And then there's a whole world of making women, well, what are the words? Money grabbing and, only after kids and la, 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 la. And I'm like, coaches can't do that. Coaches, if you're listening and you do that with your clients and someone is made wrong in the interaction, it doesn't work. It really doesn't. So when I heard you speaking about relationships, and you've used the words, terms, narcissist and codependent and stuff, you use it in such a great way as a describing word, and then you help people with their stuff. So I had to get that in to say thank you for doing what you do the way you do it. And if anyone is in any doubt about, should I work with Deb? She's speaking the right language, and you're not going to leave feeling like, oh my God, I'm a victim, or he's bad and wrong. It's like everyone leaves empowered is how I feel like the way you speak. So firstly, thank you for being that kind of relationship coach, because you're so needed. So needed.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you for so I've spoken to your community, and thank you for having an amazing community where you support women to be in relationships and to fulfill and to have amazing lives, and for their husbands and partners to have amazing lives without, again, chastising. What a refreshing. I feel mad saying it, but I'm like, how refreshing. Isn't that nice? We're not beating the other side up. So welcome, and thank you for coming to talk to me.
You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
I think you've said everything for me now. I can go.
It's like, okay, we're done here. Deb's great. That's it. So
sorted.
So here's what I don't know about you. I know that you do it that way, and this is why I love my podcast, because I get to ask people lots of interesting questions. How did you get to the point where you didn't make the men in your life wrong, and you did look at relationships in a different way? So what got you into coaching? Talk about that. Do you want to? Is that a big question?
Oh my goodness! Do we have a week, or do we have
just a small question, Deb? Tell me why you do what you do.
My goodness! Oh wow! Well, it's really interesting that you've given me the introduction that you have, because you know some of my background, and I didn't set out to become a coach at all. It wasn't even on the horizon for me.
Yeah.
But I went through, most of my adult life has been in abusive relationships. My first marriage, I married my childhood sweetheart, and he beat me up for the first time on our wedding night when I was 20 years old. It's not quite what I was expecting to happen on our wedding night, as you might imagine, but he beat me up with the words, "You're mine now, I can do what I like with you." I stayed in that marriage, which was physically and sexually abusive, for about 2 years after that. I got to the stage where I thought, well, maybe this is really what marriage is like. This is what they're not telling you. And when people talk about what happens on your wedding night, they weren't talking about losing your virginity as it used to be in the good old days. But they weren't talking about sex. They were actually talking about you becoming owned by your husband and him treating you as he wished. And I thought that's what all of these other women wandering around aren't telling you. So I sort of laboured under that belief for a while before realising I needed to get out. Because if I didn't get out, the only way I was going to end up leaving that marriage would be in a body bag, basically.
Yeah. Because that's where it goes, right? It escalates. It doesn't get better, and it doesn't fizzle out. Like that level of stuff, it escalates for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I left. It wasn't easy. I think it's 33 times a victim gets abused before they actually pluck up the courage to leave. Yeah. So, I was one of those statistics. I left, so went through my mid to late 20s, having got divorced, dealing with the fallout of being divorced. And, nobody really wants to get to 30, well, 25 in my case, and say, hey, I'm divorced already. That's not something you wanted there. You don't put that on your CV as an achievement. And when I was 30... I met and married my second husband, who happened to be my kickboxing instructor. And it's not lost on me that I married my kickboxing instructor after being in a physically and sexually abusive relationship. What I didn't realise was I was then entering my second abusive relationship, and that was a psychologically abusive relationship. But it took me a long, long time to realise that it was abusive. In fact, I didn't recognise it was an abusive relationship until I'd left that marriage, believe it or not. And again, it was very insidious. It crept up on me. When I look back with hindsight, there's so many red flags out there. He scores very highly on the narcissistic personality disorder. In today's parlance, he would be termed a narcissist. He's not. To be actually categorised as a narcissist, you have to be diagnosed by a doctor and a clinical psychologist. The irony being that most narcissists don't believe there's anything wrong with them. They are perfect. So there's no way they'd go through the tests. So we were having a conversation before we went live about the use of the term narcissist being bandied about all over the place. And you've mentioned it as well in the intro, I think. And, people, we are all on the narcissistic personality disorder scale.
Yep. Thank you for saying that.
We all have those traits.
Listen up, everyone.
Okay. Every single one of us has those traits.
Yeah.
You could say that the likes of myself and yourself, Alex Louise, because we are business owners, because we put ourselves out there, because we want people to see the best in us so they come and work with us. That is us displaying narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah.
Okay. It just is. These are traits every single one of us have at varying degrees. My ex-husband, my second husband, had them at a very, very high level, to the point where he was right, everybody else was wrong, and it wasn't him that needed to change, it was everybody else that needed to change to come up to his standards. Okay, that's just paraphrasing lots of things he used to say. That relationship was abusive in terms of my self-confidence was destroyed, my self-esteem, my self-worth. I was fat, I was ugly, I didn't know what I was doing, I was useless, I was worthless, I was lucky to have him. And I used to ask him, why do you say the things to me that you say to me? And he used to say, well, you should be grateful I don't beat you like your first husband did. And I used to sit there and say, oh, yeah, actually I am. Because I was grateful not to be being beaten up. Who wouldn't be? So, it was a really warped relationship. And the power and control balance was very out of kilter. All relationships are based on power and control. And when they're in balance, the relationship is really healthy. It's when they come out of balance that you have a problematic relationship. And that's not to say that at some stage, that's not to say everybody is on an equal level of power and control all the way throughout a healthy relationship. They're not. It fluctuates between each partner, but it's done in a really healthy way, so that the partner, like in the workplace, you give the technical work to the person who's really technical. You ask the person to stand up and speak to your audience, who is the person that is really good at standing up and speaking. You play to your strengths in a relationship. So that's where the power and control comes in there. In that relationship, although I was very much I was the breadwinner, I was running the home. I was running the business. I was the face of the business. I'd given birth to our young son. I was still made to believe that I was useless at everything. He was the one sitting at home watching TV and turning down the jobs he got offered, and then deciding he was going to come and work in my business alongside me because I needed the help. So it was really insidious, always designed to make me feel that he was helping me, always designed to make me feel that I was being looked after, and that everything he was doing was for my own good. And I believed that for a long time. But what it was also doing was chipping away at my confidence, my self-worth, my self-esteem, to make it even worse than it had been when I came out of my first marriage. And when I left that relationship, and I had, as I've just alluded to, I had started a business whilst I was married to my second husband. The business became insolvent New Year's Eve 2008, and this kind of ties into money as well. And when I sort of panicked and realised that's what had happened, and I asked him if he would put his arms around me, just tell me everything's going to be okay. As we do in those moments of stress, we turn to our partner, the people that love us, say, just tell me everything's okay. It doesn't matter if it's not going to be okay, but we just want to know that we are supported and we are loved. And he stood there on that day in my home office and said, I can't put my arms around you because I don't know that it will be okay. And then instead of saying, what can I do to help, started laying into me and telling me how stupid I was, how this was always going to happen, how the business community would be laughing at me. They were already laughing at me anyway. Everybody knew I couldn't run a business. Everybody knew I didn't know what was doing. Everybody knew that he was the person that actually makes sure things happen, that I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't have a clue. And that was it. So what was the worst moment for me at that point, he was making it even worse. So at the time where I recognised that my business was insolvent, I had just been told I needed to ring my team and make them redundant with immediate effect and no pay. And I realised that my second marriage was over. And that was an absolute body blow. Following that, I had to put the business through insolvency myself. I then went through personal bankruptcy, and I filed for divorce.
All at once.
All at once.
It happens like that, doesn't it, in life? It seems to, it's never just one. Let's have it all at the same time.
No, exactly. Then I got offered a job. I got made an offer by somebody who had been a client of mine in my previous business. And they invited me in to become a partner in their business. And my husband, because we were still married then, said to me, well, you obviously slept with him. Why else would he offer you that job? I thought, okay. That makes me feel really good. Thanks. The irony being was 3 months later, I lost the job because I wouldn't sleep with him. Yeah. You can't make this stuff up. You really cannot make this stuff up.
Yeah.
So here I was 3 months after my business falling apart and my life as I knew it falling apart at the seams. I'd then lost the job I'd managed to get, which was going to give me some hope. I went out and got another job, got made redundant from that after 3 months. And the same thing happened to the next job that I got. And this took me round about to, we're talking middle end of 2010 now. It's an 18-month period. All of that had gone on. During the time of one of those jobs, and I can't remember exactly which one it was, I think it was the middle one I managed to get, I had been able to secure myself a beautiful flat, floor-to-ceiling windows on the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea. Yeah, absolutely idyllic. After everything I'd gone through, it was the perfect location for me to start to rebuild. And I went to my husband. We were living apart at the time, but still married. And I said, my son can come and live with us. Our son can come and live with me now. Because I'd left my son with him when I'd left, because I didn't know where I was going to go. And my son was 3 at the time, and I thought, I'm not going to drag him around spare rooms and sofas and everything else. I know he's going to be looked after. He's quite settled here. I don't want to give him the trauma of being unsettled for however long it's going to take. So I left him with his dad and said, I'll come back to get him when I'm sorted. And I was still seeing my son every weekend, no matter where I was. My son was with me every single weekend. So it's not as if I just left and then didn't see him for 18 months.
I'll be back soon.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I was there every single weekend, spoke to him every single day. So I was very much part of his life. And I went back to get him. And his dad turned around to me and said, he's going to live with you over my dead body. So I then had to start what became a 10-year legal battle to be recognised, not just as his primary carer, but as his mum, because I found out that his father had been telling all of the various services, the school, the dentist, the doctor, the health visitor, you name it, that I had died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I only discovered that when I realised I hadn't been getting any reports from the school nursery. And I thought, this is odd. I've not had any reports for a while. Telephoned them to say, can I have my son's reports? Can I see how he's doing? And there was a deathly silence on the end of the phone. And I said, is everything okay? And they said, we were told that you were dead. Okay, let's unpick this one then. Obviously, it didn't take long for us to realise what had gone on, but they were quite relieved because they thought my son was going to have to be referred to an educational psychologist, that because he was handling grief really badly, because he kept talking about how he'd seen his mum at the weekend and how he'd spoken to his mum and how he was doing this with his mum. And I mean, okay, do that to your ex who you can't stand, but don't put your child through that.
Yeah.
You know, it was just so
Jeez, yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. Oh my God.
You know, that's just a little bit of a background as to why I do what I do. And then, you know, you would think things couldn't get any worse after that. You know, this is all one 18-month period because I like to get the experience. I like to cram it in there, live life to the full.
This is also during the 2008 recession as well, right? So, like, the whole economy is just a complete shit show as well. Yeah, okay.
Yes, so all this is going on. And we got to November 2010 and I remember thinking, right, I need to sort something out for Christmas. I had just lost the last of the 3 jobs I'd managed to get. I had gone through what little savings I'd managed to accrue because in bankruptcy, everything gets seized. So you can't really accrue any savings. What little I had managed to accrue had gone. My rent was due. I had no way of paying my rent. Christmas was around the corner. The Christmas presents I was able to get for my son at that time had come from charity shops, Facebook Marketplace. And all I wanted to do was to be able to buy him a brand new toy. That's all I wanted. One toy that was brand new, that came from a shop in a box that he could open. And I remember sitting at my desk feeling so dejected, like such a failure. I mean, I had so much evidence to tell me what a failure I was that I'd accrued in the 18 months previously. And I decided that the only way that I could sort things out was to take my own life. Well, I'm sitting here now, so that's another
failure.
Another failure, absolutely. And it was, and that's what I felt like. I mean, I sat there that night, I bought over-the-counter pills, I bought the alcohol.
Wow.
I drank a bottle of wine. I pushed all the pills out on my desk. I had about 70 pills. I'd worked out 60 or 70 was about how many I needed. And I had piles of 10 on my desk in front of me, picked up a pile of pills, picked up the bottle of vodka that I'd reached for the purpose, pills in my mouth, went to knock the vodka back, and I saw a photograph of my son on my bookcase. And I knew I couldn't do it. I knew I wasn't going to let him get to the age of 14 believing that Mummy killed herself because she didn't love him or didn't want him. Because that's what he was being told by his dad. Your mum left you because she didn't want you and because she didn't love you. And I thought, whatever happens, I cannot allow him to grow up with that belief because that would be so damaging for him. So, obviously, I spat the pills out, emptied the alcohol away, and thought, well, what else can I do? I've always been quite resourceful. I'd grown a really successful business previously when it was very successful. When it went through,
yes, because that's where we first met. We first met when you were running your first business. And you were doing concierge type services. Do I remember that right? What were you doing?
Virtual PA. It was the UK's first virtual PA company. Yeah. You know, industry leading business. My profile was crazily high. I used to get sick of the sight and sound of me, so I'm sure everybody else did. And, you know, I knew how to build and create a business and how to market it. So I sort of sat and looked around, thought, right, what have I got? What can I do? And realised that the only thing I had at that point that people seemed to like was my body. And so in that evening, I signed up and I became an independent escort and started working in the sex industry. And that saved my life. It changed my life as well. And that's really what led me to the path I'm on now, because everything I had gone through, I soon realised that there was one common denominator, and that common denominator was me. And I thought, why am I attracting these people into my life? I knew that I wasn't physically going out there and saying, hey, I want somebody that's going to beat me up. I want somebody that's going to torture me mentally. You know, I wasn't doing that. But something had to be going on somewhere for me to say that. And for me to get to a stage working within the sex industry where actually I ended up having all of my preconceptions shattered by that industry, because the clients weren't the dirty old men in flashbacks that the media have you believe they are. They weren't perverts who were preying on vulnerable women. They were actually decent men. And they were somebody's husband, father, brother, son. You know. And I ended up feeling more respected by the men that paid for my services than I ever had in any of my marriages and a number of the subsequent relationships I'd had sort of between them. And I thought, there's something wrong here. What also struck me was that 97% of my clients were married, and they all purported to be madly in love with their wife. And I thought, so how are you doing this? So I started having lots of questions come up for me that I couldn't answer at that stage. And I always say I must have been the world's worst escort, because I used to ask my clients
Did you ask
so many
them?
questions.
I was going to say, did you keep asking them about their lives and their story? And
and what I found, and I've spoken to lots of escorts who've said the same thing. Actually, the sex is a very small part of the time you are together. It's maybe 10% of the time you are together. The rest of the time, they actually wanted to talk. And you're in such a vulnerable position, because ultimately, I remember the first time thinking, right, okay, now I've got another sort of 50 minutes where I've got to sit here naked and make small talk. That's weird. It's hard making small talk at the best of times when you're in a bar with a glass of wine inside, you're fully clothed. You know, try doing it in a closed environment where there is nobody else there to rescue you and you're both naked. It was just, oh my God, now what do I do? So I just started asking questions. I had curiosity. Why were they choosing to use the services of the sex industry? Why couldn't they fulfill their needs in their marriage or in their relationship? And why were they prepared to pay for it when they could go out there? There's plenty of people who'd be offering it for free. Plenty of people out there who are quite happy to be the other woman. So why use these services? And it meant that I developed actually really quite interesting relationships. I'm going to use that phrase in inverted commas, because obviously it wasn't a loving relationship as such, but a relationship of mutual respect and honesty and trust with my clients. And I guess that's really where coaching or mentoring really started for me. I had a friend that I confided in at the time who's been incredibly supportive to me for many, many years. And funny enough, and there was never anything sexual or romantic between us, just he was somebody who I'd always looked upon as a business mentor in my previous business. And when I'd said to him what I was doing, and he was just, well, I kind of wish you weren't doing it, but okay, it's a business and it is. And I said, look, it's a service industry. I'm providing a service. Forget the fact that it's me. If I was cleaning windows, I'd be using a mop and bucket. I'd just not, So it's a service industry. I need to find out what's going on. And when I sort of said to him, I don't understand why these people are using the industry when it's all available for free out there, if only they would look. And he said, well, there's no risk attached. because in the eyes of my clients, and I followed this theory through and asked the questions, of course, because I'm the world's worst escort and I just want to have lots of answers to lots of questions. And I started asking, so why? Why are you using these services? And it became apparent that it was far less risky than them having an affair, because in the sex industry, they were paying for my services, which meant although I had their contact details, and there's a whole load of other stuff I can go into because that's where my coaching model comes from now. But I had their contact details. I knew their name. But because it was a business transaction, I wasn't calling them and saying, well, you promised me we'd go out on Friday night. Why aren't you here on Friday? You said we'd go out. I really want us to go out and be seen in public. Are you going to be here for my birthday? Can we spend Christmas together? You know, they weren't getting that emotional blackmail. I knew they were seeing me at, say, I don't know, I'm going to say 2:00 on a Wednesday afternoon just because today is Wednesday. But, you know, I knew I would see John Smith at 2:00 on a Wednesday afternoon for an hour, and that was it. But they would call me, so I could never really pursue them. It's not like in standard business where your leads come through and you ring the leads and say, hi, how can I help you? Let me send you a proposal. That doesn't happen. You have to be really open and transparent and say, look, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what my charges are, this is what I don't do, this is what I expect of you, here's how you make a booking. And that's it. It really is.
It strips all the bullshit out of everything, doesn't
totally.
it? Makes it like,
totally.
Boom, 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 this is it.
Yes, completely. So within the time I spent in that industry, I got really good insight into not just the male psyche, but the human psyche. And thought, the only way I'm going to be able to answer these questions properly is through psychology. But I didn't go straight and study a psychology degree at that point. I'd had two objectives going into that industry. They were to make enough money to pay my rent in advance for a year, so that I knew I was safe, and to make enough money to have the same amount again in the bank so I could live off it for a year. So I was effectively giving myself a year's breathing space. Classic Pretty Woman moment. Fell in love with a client he fell in love with me, and we ended up moving in together for a very short period of time. And I came out of the industry because whilst I was in the industry, I'd been single. I've always been a one-man woman. I've always been monogamous in a relationship. I'm not somebody that messes about. And I couldn't do that to him. He knew, I mean, that's how we met. So he knew that was my background. So I knew I wasn't getting any judgment there. But actually that became my third abusive relationship. But that was economically abusive. I ended up being a kept woman to all intents and purposes. I didn't need to work. He was successful enough that I desperately, I really didn't need to work. And he gave me an allowance every month, which sounds fantastic. And I could spend that allowance on anything I wanted to. And because of the business he was in, he would often be invited out for dinners, black tie events, those sorts of things. So any clothes I might need for those, he bought for me. So I really had this lovely allowance, which was disposable income. You know, we're talking premium skincare, handbags, shoes, meals out, facials, nails, you name it. I was living the life. But I knew that relationship wasn't healthy. It became really suffocating. I had to account for every single penny I was spending. So whilst I could spend it on anything I wanted to, I had to account for every penny. So on the one hand, it looks like I've got all this freedom in the world. I've got an amazing life. But on the other hand, although I knew that it was the wrong relationship for me and I'd made a massive mistake, I had no way of getting out because I had no spare money. I'd gone through the money that paid the rent, the money that I'd been living off. You know, there was some there, but there wasn't enough to set me up properly anywhere else. And I thought, okay, another one of those moments, maybe this is what really goes on in all of those relationships out there when you see people with this amazing lifestyle. And this is the compromise. They have the lifestyle, but the relationship actually isn't working. So I thought, well, okay, I've got nothing left to lose. So I'm going to pursue my first love, which is acting. And I I'd been offered a place at RADA when I was 19, when my first husband had proposed to me, and I thought, I can't go to London for 3 years and leave him. That's a lifetime when you're 19 years old. So I never went to RADA. There are times I think, oh my goodness, how different things could have been. But it wasn't meant to be. That wasn't my path.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that there is a path set out for us. Not that I recognised that at the time, but, that was it. So I'm in this relationship. I didn't need to work. I could pursue my dreams. And I started putting my CV out there, my acting CV out there, because I'd done lots of amateur and semi-professional work from the age of about 12 upwards. So I had a lot of experience. And I got cast in a touring production of a play that toured the southwest of the UK and South Wales. And it was during that production that I met somebody who I'd actually met in between husbands 1 and 2. We'd actually dated for a year in between husbands 1 and 2. And then he'd gone off to become a mature student at university. I'd gone to live and work in London. These are the days before mobile phones. So maintaining a long distance relationship wasn't as easy as it is now. We had to book in appointments to telephone each other. And he was off enjoying university. I didn't even want to think about what he was doing. But it just fizzled. There was no major falling out, just fizzled. But I quickly realised that he was the one that got away. He was the love of my life. And I'd be lying if I said there hadn't been times over the years where, with Facebook coming more to the fore, where I hadn't sort of Googled his name or tried to find him on Facebook. I could never find him. And I knew that he'd always wanted to travel. And the last I'd heard of him, he was living and working in Canada and had been there for 2 years. So I thought, oh, well, it's one of those things. But as long as he's happy, I'm happy. And better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all, was what I told myself. Touring production, I became the poster girl. He walked into a theatre in one of the towns we were performing in, recognised my face on the poster, asked the box office manager of the theatre if I was who he thought he was. The box office manager said, I think it might be. She was in a theatre company with my 2 daughters when she was a teenager. Yet this was a theatre 70 miles away from where I had done that.
Yeah.
So between them, they did a little bit of research, tracked me down, and he sent me a message on Facebook. Hi, remember me? How are you? How's the family? Haven't seen you for a long time. Haven't heard from you forever. What are you up to? How's life been treating you? And it really was like 2 school friends catching up. There was nothing flirtatious, nothing overtly sexual in there. Nothing at all, because he didn't know if I was married. I didn't know if he was married. We didn't know what was going on. What I hadn't realised until that moment was that the person I was living with, who was giving me this amazing lifestyle and enabling me to pursue my dreams, had actually been checking all of my emails, my social media, my phone, my text messages. He saw the message and went ballistic. There's no other way to do it. I've never been so scared in my life. Not because I thought he would beat me. It's because I had no idea what he was going to do. Because I saw a side of him I'd never seen. With my first husband, I always knew when the beatings would come. I absolutely knew when they would come in. So you prepare yourself for them. You know how to handle them. You know which makeup to use to cover up the bruises, all those sorts of things. My second husband, excuse me, I knew that no matter what I did, it would be wrong, it wouldn't be good enough, I would be a disappointment. With this relationship, I had absolutely nothing to go on. And when he found that message, he threw me out of the house. I was in my pyjamas. It was a Saturday morning, so my son was with us. My son would have been about 5 or 6 at the time. And he threw me out of the house in my pyjamas, and my son was in the house with him. And you've got 2 kids. If anybody tries to separate you from your kids,
Oh, good luck. I'll
Yeah,
fucking
exactly.
kill you.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I stood in the middle of our road and I screamed. And I screamed and I screamed. And he came out the front door and he said, "Be quiet, the neighbours are going to hear you." I said, "I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm going to carry on
And-
screaming until you let me back in, because you're not separating me from my son." So he let me in, then locked me in my son's bedroom with my son.
Mm.
My son was terrified. I'm trying to be brave for my son, thinking, what on earth are we going to do? I don't know what he's going to do to us. And my son said to me, Mum, please don't be angry, but my dad's given me a mobile phone. And I'd always said, no, a 6-year-old does not need a mobile phone. He's not having one. So his dad had given him a phone and said, don't tell your mum and keep it in your bag.
Yeah.
I've never been so grateful in my life to my ex-husband than I was at that point, you know. But then I thought, oh my goodness, now what do I do? Who do I ring? My parents were elderly. I didn't want to put them through any more crap. They'd been through enough with me over the last sort of 18 months or so, plus supporting me through my first marriage breakdown. Didn't want to call my son's father because that was going to give him even more proof that I was an unfit mother. At that point, he didn't know that I'd worked in the sex industry, but who knows what he was going to think. And he was going to use anything he could get his hands on as proof that I wasn't a good enough mum. So I thought, there's only one thing for it. I knew that the person who had messaged me was a social worker. And I thought, he's going to have dealt with situations like this before. I don't actually care what he thinks of me, but right now I need his help to make sure that my son is safe. And that was all that went through my mind. And I phoned him and he said, stay where you are, I'm on my way. 2 hours later, he arrived on the doorstep and I saw him walk down the garden path and the door was opened and I heard him say to my partner, I know you want to punch me and you're quite welcome to punch me, but right now there's a scared little boy and his mum upstairs. I need to get them and take them to his grandparents. Then I will come back, you and I can talk, and then if you want to punch me, you can. Now, I'm pleased to say that nobody got punched because I don't think the chances of the person I was living with at the time would have been very good. Bear in mind that this social worker was also a former Marine. So, you know, I knew I was in good hands and he took me and my son to my parents and just dealt with the situation. 3 weeks later, I moved in with that man, lock, stock and barrel, into his bachelor pad in Weston-super-Mare, which is where I now live. I've now been here for 9 years with him. We're not in his bachelor pad anymore. We have a slightly larger house now, I'm glad to say. And my son came to live with us 5 years ago when he was 12 years old. So, you know, there was a silver lining to those clouds. But what happened at the beginning of this relationship was I learned what it was to be loved unconditionally. And that was harder than being in an abusive relationship. Because I didn't know how to be loved that way. I didn't know how to receive love and there'd be no conditions attached and no expectations, and to be accepted solely for who I am and in the state I was in, broken, battered, bruised, you know, really a shadow of my former self. This man loved me completely. And with his support, with his nurturing, with his gentle guidance into therapy and counselling, I got stronger. I dealt with an awful lot of my demons. And then I realised was the time to study psychology. But I learned that the time I felt my strongest was when I worked in the sex industry. So I started to extrapolate the lessons from that experience into my life. And adding those to my psychology training, adding that to my lived experiences of horrendous relationships, plus a really good relationship, I started to realise and recognise that actually there's no right or wrong way to have a relationship. Because what works for me might not work for you. And what I believe is my perfect relationship in the relationship I'm now in might not be yours. There will be people out there who'll say, my God, there's no way I could live with her. And how on earth does she put up with him? And yet for us, it's the perfect fit. And when you recognise that you're okay as you are, and they're okay as they are, it's just that you quite maybe don't fit together. You know, like when you get a broken zip and it's just out of alignment.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you don't get the right fit for you. When you are the perfect fit, of course, you're like that. And that's a really, really long way of telling you why I now do what I do, because I learned from so much experience. I've learned that all 3 of my abusive exes, they didn't intend to hurt me. And I never believed, and I still don't believe, that anybody goes into a relationship with the intention to hurt somebody else.
No.
But we go into a relationship carrying our own beliefs, carrying our own ideals of what a perfect relationship is or should be, and carrying with us the examples that we have been taught of relationships, whether they are good or bad relationships. And we get most of those models from our parents, from our close family and friends, because they are the people who we believe love us. So
that's what love is, right? How they were. Well, that must be what love is.
Exactly. And people have often said to me, well, what was your home life like then? Because you would think with that sort of background, that relationship history, that's the home life I had. And it's far from it. My parents had and still have a very, very strong relationship. Very loving. I mean, 54 years married now. And back then, and it's taken me a long time to recognise where my beliefs came from. They were very much a traditional 70s marriage. So Dad went to work, Mum stayed at home and brought the kids up. And one of my earliest recollections, is of my dad giving my mum housekeeping, coming in from work on a Friday night, handing over some cash to her, and that was her housekeeping for a week. And she'd do the shopping, she'd pay the bills, she'd buy the clothes, whatever it was. And in those formative years of seeing that, of watching my mum around the house, making sure everything was lovely for when my dad came in from work, saying things like, oh, we'll ask your dad about that, or we'll see what your dad has to say, or let's wait and see and wait for your dad to come home. So all of my conditioning, and all this happens before the age of 7, all of my conditioning or my beliefs were that the man is very much in charge. So in a business environment, my dad was the chairman or chief exec, and my mum was the managing director dealing with the day-to-day. But the ultimate decisions landed with chief exec or chairman, who was my father. So I took that as a 7-year-old. That translated into a belief as I got older that the men are in charge and the men are in control, and I have to do what I'm told.
Yeah.
Now, I obviously translated that in a really incorrect way.
Well, sure, but we do, right? It's such a great, I think what I love about your share is that, people's expectations of you were that you would have had this horrific childhood, right? That would have set you up for that level of abuse in an adult. And what you're sharing is, no, it doesn't work like that. It worked as simply as it did with your parents, whose actually their marriage was fine, seeing something where the man's in charge. And when you replicate that into adulthood with a man who abuses that being in charge, but keep being okay, yes, this is how it's meant to be, all of a sudden you were living in a shit show going, what the hell? But actually that's where it comes from. And I think it's really great to hear that story for people who think, I don't understand, I don't need therapy, my childhood was perfectly normal. Yes, it probably was. And there'll have been stuff that you made it mean that doesn't work as an adult. And your story, Deb, is such a brilliant example of that. Mine's similar, right? My childhood, there was nothing really wrong. I mean, my parents aren't together anymore and their marriage wasn't really that great, but there was nothing, there was no major stuff there. There's a bit of smacking and stuff, which, you could say, well, we don't really agree with that, fine. But there was nothing there that was, and that's very similar story to yourself, not quite as, I ended up in a couple of relationships that were going physical and that I then left, but still that whole repeat, it's like, it doesn't come from major trauma. Trauma as an adult doesn't come from major trauma as a child, because trauma as a child can be as simple as something that's not traumatic at all.
Exactly.
You saw that dynamic, thought, oh, that's the way it is. But apply that with the wrong 2 people, God help us, right?
Oh, yes. God
help us.
All of this ties in with the question you asked at the beginning was, why do I not just deal with relationships? And I recognized with everything I was doing that when your relationship is bad, it has a knock-on effect, because you go into the workplace or the business and you don't focus, you're not productive. So obviously that then has an impact on the business. That then makes you feel more depressed. You don't look after yourself in terms of health and wellness. So you'll start drinking too much. And I know there was a time where I was surviving on black coffee, Chardonnay, and packets of crisps. You know, that was it. That was all that was keeping me going. There are times where I think I didn't need pills to finish myself off, because the way I was going to do that anyway, I think. But I recognise that by looking after ourselves, by improving the relationship we have with ourselves, and it sounds really trite. You hear so many coaches saying, "Oh, you just have to love yourself, self-love, self-care," and in that, that is the catch-all for it. But until you do the work on yourself, until you start to recognise what it is you need, how to look after you, and I do a lot of work with my clients in terms of what their personal boundaries are. They've got to get real and honest with themselves as well about the situation they're in whatever area of their life. Because the one thing I've learned is that they'll come to me with a relationship issue. It's very rarely a relationship issue. You'll have heard this in coaching as well. The thing is rarely the thing.
Yeah.
It's never the thing.
We're doing the money, my money mastermind course is running right now. We're in week 7. I think we did week 7 last. We haven't started talking about money yet. It's an 18-week course. I don't start talking about money till week 10. Everyone's like, "Oh, this is a money course." It's like, yeah, it is. Let's talk about this stuff first, because the money's the last piece of the puzzle, and it's the same,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. We've got to sort all the other shit out first, because when that's not working, nothing else is going to work, because you have a down day on the one side and it's going to bring everything else down. And I've noticed with my own experience in the coaching program that I created based on the 5 key pillars I learned from the sex industry, I applied to myself before I even put them anywhere near the public. And then I recognize, actually, you know what? When I start to look after myself, when I start to eat healthily, when I start to exercise, do all of those things we're told we should do, but we rarely do, because we think, I'm not being told what to do. But when we do it, we recognize, actually, hey, I feel so much better about this. What happens when we feel better about ourselves is we feel more confident. When we're more confident, we actually maintain our boundaries. We don't let people push them. When our boundaries in place, then our confidence goes up even more. We start attracting the right people to us, because they're the people that respect us and respect our boundaries. With our confidence, then our energy shifts. We attract more of the good stuff, that money included. We start to make decisions around money that are better for us, whether it's investing, whether it's spend it on quality products rather than buying cheap but buying volume, all those sorts of things. We make far better decisions. And all of those decisions and choices that we are making on a daily basis translate then into our home life, into our business, or into our career. And it's like the infinity circle. It's a symbiotic relationship between all of them. We can't just focus on relationships, because you could have the best relationship out there, but if everything else is falling apart, what's the point? What is the point? And that's why I do what I do. And people often say, "Well, we're not talking we're not talking about relationships." Yes, you know what? If you do come to me and say, "I want to know how to have better sex," we'll have that conversation. But it's not a module on sex in my program, because some relationships are absolutely fantastic and they don't have sex at all. Some marriages, there is no sex in them. Doesn't mean they're not intimate. They just don't have sex. And I get really frustrated, particularly recently. You've got me on my soapbox now, Alex. I'm really sorry.
Yes. No, never apologise. Come on, give it to me. It's good.
Oh, goodness. I don't want to bore your listeners. But I get really frustrated when I see all of these headlines about, at this age, you should be having this much sex per week. And, you need to be focusing on having the best orgasm of your life. And you need to eat this to have the best orgasm. And there's so many people I've turned around and I've said, look, you know what? This is great. And yes, orgasms are fantastic. Sex is amazing. But what if, for whatever reason, you can't have sex? for whatever reason, you're unable to have an orgasm. How does that make those people in your audience feel? Let's talk about doing what's right for our sexual health. And I'm not just meaning avoiding STIs here. I mean talking about how we use that sexual energy in a positive way, because sexual energy is all part of our desire and motivation pathway in the brain. And it is the same pathway that drives addictions to drugs, alcohol, gambling, food, exercise, shopping, you name it. It's the same pathway that is activated. You know, when you get that saying like, yes, yes. What does that remind you of? You know, we've all seen Meg Ryan sitting there going, yes, yes, yes. It's exactly the same pathway being motivated or being activated in your business, in your life, in your sex life. Just slightly different tweaks, obviously. But we can still tap into that sexual energy even if we're not having sex. So we don't need to be saying to people, you've got to be having sex 3 times a week if you're, you know, if you're 45. You've got to be having an orgasm on your own, you know, lasting this long, just because somebody has said you need to do it. I could talk about sex till the cows come home. I used to sell it for a living. I know good sex. I know really bad sex as well. But I don't need to do that. You know, I don't need to do that with my clients unless they come to me. And some people do, and they say, look, Deb, we're having some issues in the bedroom. We've got a really great relationship. Things are really intimate, but how can we get things started? How can we kickstart things? And it could be down to things like medical issues, lack of confidence somewhere. You can't just go in and start saying, well, try this position, do this, do that. And you know, these were other ththings I learned in the sex industry. I had people come to see me who actually came to see me almost for therapy. I had a blind man who'd got a girlfriend but had no idea what a woman looked like. So he couldn't really go up to a woman in a nightclub and say, excuse me, can I feel your body? He had to book an escort to say, can I feel your body? Because I don't know what a woman looks like. There was a returning soldier from Afghanistan who had been injured quite significantly with a roadside device and contacted me and said, I want to be able to make love to my wife. And we've both looked on the website online. We found you. Can you help us? And actually, it had nothing to do with his inability to make love to his wife. It had everything to do with his lack of confidence. But he thought it was all sex related. So it's about having those conversations. And that's obviously were extreme examples that in the sex industry, but equally with my clients now. They'll come to me and say, we've got these issues around sex, but I don't talk to them about sex. If I started saying to them, you need to go and do this, you need to role play that, you need to buy the biggest vibrator you can get that's going to make your eyes water before you've even taken it out of the box. They're going to look at me and think, this woman's crazy. I need to go in, I need to be gentle with them, and I need to start asking questions. And that's what a good coach does, is ask the questions. Because it might be money problems. You know, they could be having massive financial problems that they're not talking to each other about. That's creating stress, that's causing a reduction in libido, meaning neither party is able to function. The more they're trying and failing, the more stress they're getting. And so it becomes that cycle. So you have to address everything. Maybe one of them has put weight on. I work with majority of my clients are women 40, 45 plus, hitting menopause. One of the side effects of menopause is weight gain. None of us like it. It's a fact of life. It happens. We stop feeling attractive when we've put the weight on. So we have conversations around that, build the confidence up again. And it would be so, I think it's unethical of me not to address the other factors and just focus on the relationship. Because I don't know about you, but if you have a bad day at the office, who gets it in the neck?
That's true, right? Even if it's, please don't talk to me because I'm not fit for human consumption and nothing is going to go well. You know, I'm contained enough to say, look, I've had a fucking shit day. Like, just, the best thing to do right now is for me not to speak, but they're still getting it, right? They still have to deal with it.
That's it. I know here, the warning sign is if I come in and it's sort of tea time, 5, 6 o'clock, I'm pouring a glass of wine, I'm having a bath.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll leave you alone for a couple of hours. And I emerge from the bathroom a few hours later. Right. How was your day? And then I'm fine. Yeah. So, we have those ways, but we do take it out on our partners. And if we're not aware of that,
that's so damaging over time. So damaging. So I'm intrigued. I think I know, but I'm intrigued when you were having the conversations with the guys, what they were saying were their reasons and my assertion is it was all to actually be not acknowledged, not seen, and not appreciated, not really to do with the sex. But I'm interested to know what they said when you asked them.
Most of it,
or was it lots?
You have hit the nail on the head pretty much there. A lot of them very, very successful in their own right.
Yeah.
And they were fed up of having to take responsibility for everything. They had to take responsibility in the workplace for their team.
Yeah.
Then they would go home and it'd be, what do you want for dinner? Where are we going on holiday? What are you doing Thursday night? What do you want to do Saturday night?
Yeah.
What should we do about the kids? And they felt that they never had a chance to switch off.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure there are plenty of men out there who go and have a legitimate massage or go and, I don't know, play football or hit a squash ball around. And that's their way of unwinding. For the clients I saw, it was, I want to be listened to. I want to be heard. I want to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to make any decisions if I don't want to. I want communication. And some of them, it was their sexual needs weren't being met. For whatever reason, their wife wouldn't do whatever it was they wanted. I'm trying to think. None of them were what I would refer to as particularly extreme. Maybe I just accept an awful lot. I don't know, but no, I don't think I do actually, knowing what research I've done on that. I've tried.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, it was about they weren't feeling that they were being accepted wholly for who they were. And there is so much social conditioning that goes around relationships and marriage and what is and isn't acceptable in our sex lives as well. And unfortunately, for the most part, and there are exceptions, of course, to every rule, but for the most part, women are brought up being told they have to be good girls and do what is expected of them. And that includes aligning with what is socially accepted. So if they are asked to do something different in the bedroom that is a little bit more than missionary position on a Friday night, then
it's all a bit too much.
To feel it's it's a bit too much. This is weird. There's something wrong with you. You're a pervert. And okay, that is an extreme example, but you know where I'm going to on this.
Sure.
And so they were then made to feel that they were dirty in some way. There was something wrong with them.
Yeah.
And here they were talking to a woman who was absolutely no judgment at all, who was accepting them as they were, who didn't comment on the belly that's no longer a six-pack, who didn't roll over and say, not tonight, I've got a headache, because obviously I couldn't do that. I was paid for it. But I got to pick and choose my working hours. So if I didn't want to work, I didn't work. It was as simple as that. But these men were coming in and being accepted for who they were without judgment, and they could be, say, do whatever they wanted within reason on the do. But they could absolutely be themselves and know that it wasn't going to be brought up in a future argument, know that there was going to be no blame laid at their door, know that they were just accepted for who they were. And that was the biggest thing that came through. And I remember thinking, are women really that judgmental? Are they really that difficult?
Hard to be with.
Do we really have so many expectations of our men. And of course, I started thinking back to my previous partners, and although they were abusive, I started asking, what were my expectations of them? What did I expect? And of course, we go back to the condition, the beliefs that were installed in me when I was 7 and translated incorrectly, so that by the time I got to 20, when I was married, I expected to be looked after, but I also expected him to be in charge and make all the decisions. So I was just going to get a lovely life. All I had to do was do as I was told. Actually, that's really difficult to do. It puts the men in a really, really difficult position, because they get no feedback for their decision making. They get no input from us. But if they get it wrong,
they know about it.
Them. Yeah. And then what happens as women? We withhold sex. We don't talk to them. We go and spend loads of money. We go out with our girlfriends and we might snog somebody else while we're out. We drink too much. And we really make our men feel like shit. That's no way to behave. Yeah. So, let's turn this whole thing on its head and say, right, what are our expectations in relationships? What do we want? How do we work together to create a relationship that works for all of us or both of us? And it comes down, to mutual respect. It comes down to communication, but again, it needs to be open and honest. We need to have firm boundaries in place. We need to feel secure. And we need to have that balance of power and control. And when all of that works, your relationship is just incredible. And you can deal with the bad stuff. I'm not saying my relationship is always up here. It's not. I've got a normal relationship just like everybody else. We have our good and bad days. And we have tough times, and we both sit there and we think, my God, did I really want to be with you for the rest of my life? I don't know about you, but before that, I have woken up sometimes and thought, will you just stop breathing? Why have you got to breathe so loudly? We all do that. That's normal. It doesn't mean the relationship is over. It just means we're going through a few difficult days. It might be weeks. But when the absolute core and foundation of the relationship is strong, you get through it. And what makes that strong? Well, obviously, our values and principles are aligned as well.
Yeah, it's huge. It was interesting when you were saying about how when you used to see clients, and it would be really clear, right, that all the sales process is basically taken away. And there's these are the rules. This is how it goes. If you're all right with that and I'm all right with that, we'll carry on. And it's like, we don't do that in relationships unless we really, have these conversations, or we have a coach, or we've done some work. It's like, there was no point in my growing up did anyone explain to me how to be in a relationship and how to navigate a relationship and how to decide for myself what was okay and not okay, and how to say that. Because I had this, I had the problem of I just didn't say what wasn't okay. I'd just turn into this mute, rest of my life smashing it in an intimate relationship. This mute, very similar story to yours, of just like, you're in charge. Well, if that's where you want us to go on holiday, yes, let's go there. And then end up hating them for it. Because I didn't want to go on there. I didn't want to go there on holiday. And they're like, you never told me. You didn't ever say anything.
Exactly. Let me ask you a question. When you go into a coffee shop, what coffee do you order?
An Americano with oat milk.
Why do you have that?
Because that's what I want.
Okay. So see how easy it is to ask what you want in a coffee shop. That's how easy it is to ask what you want in a relationship. And I do that with my clients. I'll say, what coffee do you have when you go into a coffee shop? And they say, blah, blah, blah. Americano with oat milk. Oh, okay. That was really hard to ask for, wasn't it? And yet you walk into a coffee shop and you're faced with this huge menu. And I have no idea. I don't drink coffee. So I go into a coffee shop and my son says to me, oh, for goodness sake, Mum, this is so embarrassing. And I'll go in, I'll say, well, I want decaf, oat milk, and can I have, what's that one up there? And I'll point at something. That sounds interesting. What's that one? And my son's there at 17 years old. I'm like, oh, Mum, this is so embarrassing. And I ask the questions until I get what I want. I ask the questions so that I'm informed. I'm not going to just go in and say I want an Americano with oat milk, because I know if I drink an Americano, it just makes me so ill because my caffeine gives me palpitations.
Yeah.
But if I just got what I was given, it just wouldn't work. I'd say, well, I'm not going to that coffee shop again. They can't do anything right.
Yeah.
But yet in our relationship, we expect our partners to mind read. Give us what we want without asking for what we want.
And then get annoyed with them when they get it wrong. But still don't tell them what we want or how they got
You're
it
giving
wrong.
me
Just
soy
then they
milk,
got
not
it
oat milk.
wrong. Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. And when you start to strip it all apart, it's so easy, and we overcomplicate it because we start paying attention to the media, which tells us that, you know, in order to have it all, everything is about sex these days. We know that sex sells everything, and that's fine. If you like sex, that's great. But actually, our lives aren't like that. Sex is a driver in our lives. But we don't all walk down the street or go about our business thinking about sex and how we can turn this into a sexual product or service, because people would think there was something wrong with us. Yet it's okay for us to be bombarded with these messages thousands, millions of times a day, because big business, marketing companies know we are driven by sex because it taps into that desire and motivation pathway in the brain, which makes us want more of anything. And that's why they do it. And it's very cleverly done, and you can see a lot of it happening. And even as somebody who's aware of it and knows what's going on.
Yeah, we're not immune from it just because we know what's happening,
not
right?
At all. Because we all have the same sort of wiring, pretty much.
Yeah.
And, you know, might look at something and think, oh, that's a bit sexy. I wonder if I drink that tea, I'm going to feel like, you know, I don't know, Julia Roberts. Well, there's no way in a million years I'm going to be like Julia Roberts. I might have similar hair, but I'm about 3 foot shorter than her for a start. You know, so...
Yeah.
But they tap in to that desire, and we all want to feel sexy. We all want to feel attractive to other people. And that's what's used to tap into it. So sex absolutely drives everything. But relationships are so much more than sex. And it's all of the other stuff around our lives. The money, the health and wellness, the business, or the career that impacts our relationship, that impacts our sex life. And you cannot deal with one without the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you say to someone who's listening to this now going, oh, well, I kind of feel like my relationship isn't right, but I just don't know where to start? Because it's a really overwhelming. I don't know how you felt when I started to realize what I was doing in my relationships. It was a bit overwhelming, and it was really, you know, there's a whole world, right? There's probably single people who listen to this going, oh God, I never want to be in a relationship again, because every time I get in one, it's a shit show. That I was one of those. Luckily, I had a coach who went, yes, and the only way to deal with this is to go dating. So off you go, basically supported, obviously. But, you know, so I've been in that place of like, no, never again. My life is going to be better if I just don't do it. So there's that type of person. There's someone who's in a relationship going, God, I don't think this is right. I don't think I should be treated like this, but what the F do I do? I've got kids and we're financially enmeshed and all of that. So what do you say to people who are just, I'm going to say paralyzed, whether they're single or in a relationship, and are just like, oh God, how do I do this? How do I navigate this?
Yeah. First thing I would do is say, talk to somebody, whether it's me, and I always offer a free 30-minute heart-to-heart call anyway.
Cool.
But talk to somebody who's a specialist in relationships. Isn't just talking about sex. Isn't just talking about how to have the perfect relationship, because the perfect relationship doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist, yeah.
But who will listen to you and will help you to create a plan. Because one of the biggest things is we all know what we don't want, but we don't know what we do want. And sometimes you know things aren't right in your relationship, but until you know what you actually want, you're going to go from one bad relationship to the next, to the next, to the next, until you work it out. And take it from somebody who's followed that route.
Yeah, me too.
You
It's a
don't want to,
long way
you
around.
don't want to do that. It's
So
hard work.
if you can avoid it, don't do it. It's made us both probably excellent coaches, but it's not a great way to have an easy
No,
life
you know,
or a good
it's given lots of
relationship.
experience, plenty of material for a book, a couple of books, but you know, I don't
Oh my
advocate
God, I don't
that
recommend it.
pathway at all. So
Yeah. Yeah.
speak to somebody, and I know Alex, you'll probably drop my links in the show notes as well.
Absolutely,
But
yeah, they'll be like
you know,
wherever you're listening
I'm
to or
open
watching this,
to
it'll all be
a
there.
free heart-to-heart call
I love
for
that
anybody.
heart-to-heart
There's
call.
no
It's
obligation.
brilliant.
Well, it is. You know, imagine
Yeah, it's
sitting down
great.
with your girlfriends with a glass of wine, and this is the sort of conversation you want to have with your girlfriends, but you know they're going to be biased.
Just can't.
Your
Yeah.
girlfriends will tell you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah.
I'm
Or
not
they'll,
gonna do
or
that.
they'll, or it's such a tricky thing to, or they'll go, oh, I knew he was a bastard. Ah, rah, rah, and like make him wrong. It's such a minefield talking about this stuff to girlfriends who aren't. I mean, I feel very lucky now that I have a lot of girlfriends who we've all done therapy, we've all done coaching, we're all in coaching, so I could say it to girlfriends now and it's fine. But most people don't have that, right? Most people's
Exactly.
friends are just struggling to get through the freaking day, haven't done much coaching or therapy, and the answer you get is not usually helpful. I'd say if anything, it makes things worse often.
That's right, because the job of your girlfriends is to agree with you, of course. Yeah. So whatever you say is right.
Yeah.
But if you tell your girlfriends he's a bastard, he's done this, they're going to say yes, of course he is. And then the next minute when you can say, oh, isn't he wonderful? He's done this for me. He's the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. They're going to agree with you. You can't get an objective viewpoint from girlfriends. And, you know, it's one of the things I do. I'm very direct with my clients or anybody that books a heart-to-heart with me. I'm open, I'm honest, I'm direct. I won't hurt you. I will tell you what I can hear. It's entirely up to you what you choose to do with it. Nobody has to follow my advice. And, you know, I'm more of a coach and a mentor, I suppose. But, you know, I can tell you what I see. I can ask you questions to help you come up with the answers on your own, but I can't force you to do anything you don't want to do. And that's the key thing. You are in total control of any choices you make, whether it's to stay, whether it's to leave. They are your choices, and there's no right or wrong answer. Unless you are being physically abused, beaten, sexually abused, where I would be saying you need to get out. And if that was the case, I would actually be contacting services on your behalf anyway. I have an ethical duty to do that. But, you know, we can have an initial conversation. There is always a solution. As I've said to my son for donkey's years, and he now says to me, oh, Mum, I wish you'd stop saying that. But I'll always say to him, there is always a solution. We just haven't found it yet. Yeah. Because there is always a solution.
And I think we're all, as humans, we just want to know, is this right or wrong? Should I stay or should I go? And it's like, it's never that simple, but there is always a solution.
Well, we want certainty.
There's a way. Yeah.
Look at the last couple of years. One of the biggest issues during the lockdowns was none of us had certainty. And that's what's increased the levels of stress and anxiety. Yeah. When we have certainty, we can walk into the future knowing what's going to happen, knowing what's expected of us.
Yeah.
When you haven't got that, and when you're thinking that you might leave a relationship and unpicking all of the different strands that go with that, you have no idea of knowing what's around the corner. And that's frightening.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you say, and that's when you really realise it's not just the relationship. It affects everything. Work, kids, you know, where you live, your money, your finances, you know, the number of clients I have, you know, where the money is just completely enmeshed and entangled and there's no kind of clarity. So no one's got certainty in that area, even when they're together. It's like there's no, so it's nothing like a relationship breakdown to make you realise how much everything is connected.
Oh,
including businesses, right? The number of us that have businesses with partners. You know, I've done that in the past. I mean, Owen and I, you know, we do in this house together, but the rest of our businesses are completely separate. He's got his portfolio, I've got mine. It's really clean, it's really clear. I mean, people are surprised when we say we don't even have a joint account, but it's like, it's so clean. Like everybody knows where the money is. We both know what we're accountable for.
Exactly.
It's
We're the
simple.
same. We don't have a joint account.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are both completely financially independent of each other.
Yeah.
And we both pay into the house and all of that.
Yeah, sure.
But we are financially independent of each other. And it works really well, because then there's no complaints over, well, you've just spent all that money on, he likes to motorbike. You've just spent all that money on a motorbike. He can't say to me, well, you've just spent all that money on getting your nails done or a new pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's my money. So what?
Yeah, it's huge.
So it's nice to have that independence where you can say, it's my money, I'm making the choice that I want to make. It's so important.
Yeah, and it's huge, I think, when navigating life's changes as well, and having conversations about money whereby couples are really clear, because there's these times in our lives when the women have the kids, and so far men aren't having kids. Like, in the physicality of it, there's going to be some time where your career is impacted, and it's like actually dealing with that and having those conversations, but in an independent way, not in a sort of weird way where you end up with some kind of scenario where someone's got all the power because they're making the financial decisions. It's huge.
Exactly.
Really huge. What do I want to ask right now? I'm just phrasing the question. What was your biggest lesson from the sex industry that you didn't expect? So what was the most surprising things that you learned? That you were like, oh, I didn't think the world was like that? Because you did mention earlier that it just wasn't what you thought it was going to be, like dirty old men in Macs and perverts.
I think that was my biggest learning, was that actually the people within the sex industry, they're just normal, regular people. And I'm talking about the sex industry rather than the porn industry, which is slightly different, but everybody is still just human, still out trying to make a living, doing something they're good at, something they enjoy preferably, and providing a service. And that was the shocker for me, that this industry goes on in streets, villages, towns, cities around the world, alongside the rest of us going out on our 9 to 5. This is going on underneath, and that industry is more important to the global economy than any other industry, believe it or not. And I really had my eyes opened about it. I learned so much, as I said before, about the human psyche and what people were prepared to do, how they expect to be treated. And don't get me wrong, there were some very dark moments within that industry, so I'm not about glamorizing it or sensationalizing it.
Yeah, sure.
But for me, and I can only talk about my experience and that of the other workers who I knew, for the most part, we had really positive experiences with people who are really respectful of who we were, what we did, and how it was done. And I guess it's actually the framework. I created the SIM methodology for my coaching, and it underpins all of my coaching. It underpins my life now. And that stands for Sex Industry Model. And it was those lessons that came out of it, and recognizing that if only business or life followed some of the same rules as this industry does, it would be so much better, because it would be so much more open and honest. There would be so much more respect for boundaries. People would feel secure, because there are security mechanisms within the industry that make independent workers safe. And people wouldn't be afraid about power and control. They wouldn't be afraid about asking for what they want. And when I came to that realization and sort of started pulling it together as a coaching program, it just made so much sense. And then applying that to my life. And I've always been somebody, even within that industry, the biggest issue for me in that industry was that I couldn't openly talk about what I was doing. I couldn't go to a networking meeting and say, oh yeah, I'm Deb and I'm a sex worker. You can't go into a network meeting and do that. So I had to lie. If I was out and about and people said, oh, what do you do? I had to lie.
What did
And
you used to say?
I think I used to say, oh, I'm a consultant. I mean,
Brilliant.
I was consulting, I was coaching, I was consulting,
Yeah.
but, you know, I knew that I wasn't being honest. And that, I really struggled with that because you know, I'm a lot of things, as are we all,
Yeah, yeah,
but
sure.
I'm always open and honest. And that was the biggest issue for me. But the industry, when you're within it, it is so honest. And
Yeah.
if people call you, you know, I'd get phone calls or emails saying, oh, will you do this? Can we do that? Blah, blah, blah. I say, no, you need to read my website. I've told you, I don't do that. Stop wasting my time. That's not what I do. Or can I have a discount? No, you can't have a discount. And then people perhaps carry on. You say, look, that's it. I'm drawing a line. I'm not seeing you. You are not going to work with me. I'm not selling my services to you. Okay. But if somebody asked if you did something and you didn't, you could say to them, oh, no, that's not my thing, but you might want to speak to so-and-so, so-and-so. They say, oh, no problem. That's lovely. Thanks very much. There was no trying to make things work for the client if they absolutely didn't. You would pass them, refer them on to somebody else who you knew did whatever it was they wanted. Likewise, you know, I'd get referrals from people. It was when you forget about the service being offered.
Service, yeah.
It's a really, really good business model. It's very clear, it's very transparent, and surprisingly honest within the industry. And those were my learners, because I sort of expected, you know, I'd kind of seen Pretty Woman and thought, well, it's Hollywood, so that's all really far-fetched anyway. I'd seen lots of news reports about prostitutes getting found in ditches and things like that. And I was fortunate. I never stood on street corners. I didn't have to solicit. I didn't solicit. That's illegal. Escorting isn't. And I know that because I had to get the police involved at one point in something. And they told me, no, everything you're doing is perfectly legal. Yeah. Which was very good, because that was a very tricky time for me. But just recognising that people, when you get down to base needs and desires, people are generally honest and generally good. And we all want the same thing. So I haven't really answered your question as to what was the biggest learning, because there were so many learnings which have created a bigger understanding of the human psyche, I think.
Yeah. And what interests me is, as I wonder where we get to, that we can't talk about sex. You know, it's not just sex industry or like, it's just not something that's talked about. It's like,
yet we're surrounded by it on a daily basis.
We're surrounded by it. We're all
marketing.
driven by it. It's in our faces on a level that's unbelievable, and yet we can't just talk about it in some way. You know, like we can sit here now and we can talk about stuff, but just on a day-to-day level, it's not something you talk about in a cafe or in a restaurant, or that fascinates me, that it's still so almost taboo, and yet it's never been so in our faces. It's really confusing, that difference. So we kind of assume everyone's talking about it, but actually no one is.
People do, but it's always done in hushed tones. It's always done with great hilarity and titillation, because we all want to know what people do in the privacy of their own homes. Look at any of the number of the reality programs. You know, we want to see people in real lives. We're all voyeurs, basically. And we want to know what people do. We want to find out, am I normal? Oh, they do that. Well, I don't do that. Does that make me normal, or does that make them normal?
Yeah.
Who's abnormal here? So we are constantly, we're constantly judging ourselves on other people. And the one thing we don't know is what people do in their bedrooms, unless they choose to show it. And there's plenty of websites out there where people can do that. Let's face it, OnlyFans for a start, which wasn't around when I was working. Not that I would have done it, but it didn't exist then. It's become an acceptable way for people to make money. I use the term acceptable very loosely there. But we all want to know what goes on behind closed doors. We all want to know how other people live. And the reality shows, OnlyFans, various other websites, all the videos. It used to be the porn mags on the top shelf when I was growing up. I don't know that you get them as much these days. And it gave us a glimpse into other people and something that we could compare ourselves to say, am I normal? ultimately. There's so, all of those headlines that say you need to be having sex X number of times a week if you're 35, 40, 45, 50, whatever it is. They are there because we all want to know where we fit on the scale. Am I in the top 10%? Or do I need to do some work because I'm in the bottom 10%? And we see this through school. All the high achievers are awarded. You see it on the sports field. You get medals if you come first, second or third. Everybody wants to be one of those top achievers because that's where you get the top rewards. And sex is no different. We want to be seen as being this massively sexual being because that's where we get the best rewards, as in we get the best mates, the best looking mates, they have more money, they look after us more. But actually, we don't talk about it because we're also told being overtly competitive isn't good because we all have to be nice. And when we have being overtly competitive as a deterrent, plus the fact that sex is really intimate and you don't share the intimate details of your life or your relationship with anybody, then we have generations of women who are told what they should do and have to be a good girl. And we look at the likes of, I'm going to say Kim Kardashian because she comes to mind, who ultimately is famous because she got her kit off and made a sex tape. Because I don't know that she's got much talent other than that. She might do, I might have missed it. But, she's where she is because she dared to show us the intimate areas of her life, and it made everybody else feel normal or feel relieved or feel that it was okay. And by following her, by supporting her, she's then driven to create more and more, which then feeds our desire for more and more information, gives us that, the door that was ajar is now wide open. And we're getting to see the inside of her life. And guess what? Now we have something to aspire to, so that competitive aspect comes out. And the desire and motivation pathway kicks in again, and that is what drives us. We all end up in this circle.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we all want that, but we're not allowed to talk about it because then that makes us not good girls.
Yeah.
I suspect in your coaching group, people have a problem saying how much money they really want.
Oh, sure, 100%.
And why do they have that problem? Because it's not good to be seen as greedy.
And not even saying it. Here's the double thing, right? It's not even saying it out loud to the group. It's not even really want to say it to themselves. I think that's the other thing. It's like too layered, because it's not just saying it out loud. It's like, don't even want to say that to themselves or deal with that or want that, or deal with the fact that if they say it out loud, they haven't got that. Or what if I say I want that and then I fail? Because that's what happens, right? We don't. Absolutely. I don't want to aim for the stars because then, what if I fail? All of that. Well, it's like, yeah, but what if you get it? What exactly. If it works? What if, that allowance of, abundance and having all the things you want, and it's huge. It's really huge. I mean, we deal with it now. We're doing, the mini mansion makeover on another bit of YouTube, and we're sharing and I still drive. We've been here 8 weeks now, and I still drive onto the drive and go, holy shit, is this my house? We actually joke that, and Owen and I are obviously, we're pretty good at money, otherwise we wouldn't do what we do. And even we joke with people, we're like, we're waiting for the real owners to come home because we're living in this house that's ridiculous, and at the same time feel totally at home here. It's such a paradox because actually it's it's fine, it's all good, it's all fun. And the conversation wider is what will people think? Because there's a whole world that people don't realize, that actually people who've got a big house or a lot of money or wealth or riches or whatever, they've actually got to deal with what everyone thinks. The other way round.
Exactly.
It's just,
none of us are immune to this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely huge. You mentioned slightly earlier, it sounded like you have a distinction with the porn industry. What is that? If it's there, I just picked up on, you said porn industry is different. I tend to agree with you, but I'm interested in your what
my
you say
definition
about
is,
that.
let's look at Hollywood. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood purports to give us films that make us feel good, that, you know, they generate feelings in us, whether it's a horror film, whether it's feel good, whether it's comedy, whatever it might be. And we look to Hollywood when times are bad. We look to Hollywood to provide us with entertainment. And a lot of the time we look to Hollywood to provide us with hope. And the job of Hollywood is to make us create a fantasy out of real life. The porn industry does the same thing. And I think when you look at the porn industry as a film industry that brings fantasies to life on screen, you know, these are all actors. They have a script. It might be a very loose script, but they have a script to follow. There are lots of things that happen behind the scenes in terms of what you're seeing is not real. You know, just like you have special effects and makeup in Hollywood, you have that in the porn industry as well. And what happens is, because we don't talk about these things, so many generations have grown up thinking the porn industry is real. And yes, you know, they're real people acting in it, but they are ultimately filming fantasies. And, you know, however many different genres of film there are out there, there are that many different genres in the sex industry and in Fantasyland. They are filming fantasies to show people and make people think, oh God, you know, I want to do that. The reality is most people won't do that. Where there's an issue is where people try to emulate the porn industry. And we're seeing this issue now, certainly in young boys who have access to the internet.
That was my next question of what do you think
porn.
it's doing to children?
Yeah. It's particularly damaging for the younger generations now. They're finding porn and they are believing that that is how you have a relationship, that is how you have sex, because they're not old enough to recognise that this is fantasy land. It's make-believe. And I have a number of things I'd like to say about that. First of all, how the hell are they accessing the porn? Make sure you've got your parental locks on, because I've got a 17-year-old and he can't access porn. You know, he is so locked down here. And at 17 years old, you know, I'm not naive enough to think he's never seen porn. I know he's seen porn, but there's no way he was able to access that stuff at 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, maybe probably started seeing it with friends, as we all did. But you know you're not meant to. It is so readily accessible because kids have access to this stuff. Parents think, I don't need to put parental lock on it. They're not going to do it. Kids will. They're curious.
Yeah.
You know, think of what you were like when you were young. We are curious. We want to find out about the things adults talk about or tell us we're not allowed to see. It's just normal human child behaviour. So we have that going on. As adults, we recognise that, you know, there might be some aspects of porn that are great in the bedroom. We might want to enact them. But you can't live your life like that. My goodness. If we were to try and emulate that every day in our own homes, none of us would work. We wouldn't have time to work. We'd be too exhausted to work for a start. You know, it just wouldn't happen. It's not real. And because we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about the sex industry, we don't talk about porn and have those open conversations around it, other than to say, it's disgusting, it's dirty, don't talk about that. We're closing down the conversations that enable us to talk about it and say, look, this is what happens in the porn industry. Yes, you know, some people like it, some people don't. It's all about fantasy. That's not how you have a real loving relationship. A real loving relationship is two people who meet, they fall in love, they learn to trust each other, they respect each other, then they have sex, then it becomes intimate, and they decide what they want to explore themselves. But we close those conversations down before they've even started. So we lay all of this blame at the porn industry's door or the sex industry's door. We need to be coming back round that circle, closing that loop and saying, actually, we need to be having those conversations. And it's not about showing our children porn and saying, don't watch that, that's dirty. It's about acknowledging its existence, having those conversations. Comes back to what you were saying about we don't have conversations with our friends much about sex. I mean, as you get older, you have more open conversations about sex, but we still don't go into detail. Yet, our children are the people, we're their parents. We are responsible for what goes in up here. We're responsible for all of that. We can't leave it to the teachers. Teachers have an education plan to follow. There is some sex education in that. But it is not their responsibility to actually teach our children what is socially acceptable and isn't. Because we have to consider there's, what isn't acceptable has cultural boundaries as well. Every culture, every country is different in what's acceptable and what isn't. And we need to be having those open conversations at home, around the dinner table.
Yeah, literally around the dinner table, like it's completely normal, right?
That's it. When I was growing up, we would have conversations sat around the dinner table. My father would come in, dinner would be on the table. That 70s typical background again. But we'd sit and we'd have dinner. The TV would be off and we'd all talk. We'd talk about our day. We'd talk about what was going on. We might have seen something on the news as kids and we'd say, what's happening? Falklands War, for example. What does this mean? Does this mean that we're going to go to war? All those sorts of things. We had those conversations and asked questions. Then as we got older, we might find things related to sex. I know growing up, mentioned briefly earlier, porn mags. You'd often see pages of porn mags ripped out and floating around the street. So that might come up in conversation. What was that a picture of? Why is it floating around the street? So you could have those conversations. Maybe I was lucky. Maybe my parents were open to having difficult and open conversations with us. I don't know. But these are conversations. It's our responsibility as parents to be having with our children. It's not the responsibility of the internet to teach our children morals, to teach them about values and principles. It's our responsibility as parents, because our children will grow up to have the same values and principles as us. And as if we openly are watching porn in front of our children, if we're openly doing the things that aren't suitable for our children to see it, but we're openly allowing them to do that, then actually it's us that the blame lies with. It's not the child's fault. It's not the industry's fault. I'm like it with all films, horror films that are 18 rated, horror film, they all have the ratings on them for that reason. The arguments I had with my son when he was 12 years old because I wouldn't let him watch 15s or 18s. Well, so what? They've got that rating for a reason. And yes, I didn't want to argue with my son. I did feel like I was a stuck record, constantly saying no, constantly putting those boundaries in place. But you know what? 17 years old, he's glad I did. Yeah. And I see him having respect now for other younger people when he's saying, no, you shouldn't be watching that. And he'll say to me, he'll watch some of the things now that I wouldn't let him watch when he was younger. I say, my God, Mum, I can't believe I wanted to watch that when I was 12. That would have really damaged me. It's our job as parents to make that call. It's not, industries, the porn industry is really clear. You have to be 18 and over to view this. You have to be 18 and over to access this content. Yeah. Children aren't daft. They know how to put in a changed date of birth. It's our responsibility.
Are you over 18? Tick.
Yes, exactly. It's our responsibility to ensure our children can't access it. It's not the responsibility of any industry to stop our child from trying to access it. Yes, safeguards have to be put in place, and they do that to a degree, but the responsibility stops with us as parents. And we have a whole society who believes nothing is their responsibility. It's everybody else's fault. Everybody else has to take responsibility, whether it's the government that has to be responsible for things, whether it's the industry they work in, or whether it's the industry that has offended them in some way. We have to start taking personal responsibility, because that's the only way we make change. Because it is easier to change ourselves and those around us than it is for change to be forced upon us. Because when change is forced upon us, we push back.
Yes, I have a saying, and I don't know where I heard it or where it came from, but it's easier to wear slippers than to carpet the world. Put your slippers on,
Absolutely.
folks. Stop trying to carpet the world, because, geez, we're never going to do it, right? It's the same with this.
Exactly.
What, I'm looking for an answer. It's impossible. I know that. So I'll pre-frame the question with, I know this is an impossible question to ask. What do you say to people who are dealing with porn within a relationship as adults? Does it come back down to what we've just been talking about? It's personal responsibility. Do you think there's for me, it's like as any addiction, right? Some people can have a glass of wine and they have absolutely no problem with alcohol, and other people can't. I have it that it's probably not similar, but don't deal in that area too much.
There are similarities, and I'm not an addiction expert. So porn as an addiction needs a specialist. You need a specialist addiction expert to deal with that, as you would for somebody who's addicted to alcohol, to drugs, to gambling, anything else. However, porn in a relationship, it creates problems, again, because we are brought up to believe it is bad. And it depends how it is being used in a relationship. If it's being watched furtively and secretly, and it's causing a problem because you're sitting downstairs watching your soaps of an evening, but hubby's upstairs in the spare bedroom glued to porn, or it might be the other way around. It might, more and more women watch porn these days. That's a problem. There's something missing in the relationship that's causing the two of you to want to spend that time apart. And you can blame it that they're watching porn all the time, but they could equally say, well, I'm watching porn all the time because I'm not getting what I need or what I want. And it goes around then in a circle, because we are conditioned to say it's acceptable to sit on the sofa watching soaps every night. It's not acceptable to sit in a darkened room and watch porn every night. They're both just watching different things on a screen, ultimately. We're conditioned to believe that porn is bad, that it objectifies women. Yes, on the one hand, it does objectify women. On the other hand, those women are there, and they're there because they want to be there. Majority of people in the sex industry are there because they choose to be there, not because they are forced there. I've done the research. I've got the stats. So that's not just me saying that because I was once a sex worker. I researched it after that. So, they are not being objectified against their will. They are choosing to do it. So there's lots of reasons, as I just said, why porn causes a problem in relationships. Most of it's down to our conditioning. Most of it's down to our beliefs that it's bad, it's dangerous, and it's just going to lead to worse things. What I say is, what's missing from the relationship that porn is fulfilling at the moment? And it probably isn't sex.
Yeah, I like that. It's a really great question.
When you dig deep, it's likely to be something else. And that is the sticking plaster. We take a pill for a headache. We get a regular headache. It's there all the time. We take pills constantly until about 6 months down the line. We say, I've had this headache now for 6 months. I've been living off paracetamol for 6 months. I feel really shit. Maybe I should go to the doctor.
Deal with the headache. Why we've got the headache, not with the headache.
If something is causing a headache in your relationship, and in this case, in this question, it's porn. Why? Why is the porn causing a problem? Because many relationships enjoy viewing porn together. Many couples enjoy viewing porn together, and that's not a problem at all. So why is it a problem in this relationship? What is making it a problem? What problem is it hiding?
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it, right? And it's like both ways. It's like, why is it a problem for one of the people that it's a problem for? Like, what's going on there? And what is it that it's fulfilling on the other side for the person? Like, what's missing there? So it's not just, again, one-sided. And I think there's a lot in society where it's made the person's problem. Take it off porn for a second. It's the alcohol. It's like, well, what's wrong with you? And it's like, well, it's everyone. Everyone's dealing with a scenario, aren't they? So
exactly.
Let me have a look at time. I could talk to you all day. 2:30. I was like, I've got a hard stop today. I have to go and pick up the kids, which is probably not a bad thing. Otherwise, we would just keep going. I've got so many questions to ask you. what do you say to people who have been together for a long time and things are just not the same? Like, it's all a bit meh. This is not happening for me yet. Owen and I have only been together 5 years. It's just anyone's like, everything's fine with Owen, no one worry. In the realm of a fast-paced world where everything's meant to be new and exciting all the time, personally, I love the stability of being in a relationship for that reason.
So do I.
What do you say to people who, have been together for a long time and there's something missing, or there's the sort of scenario of, I don't know, the kids are leaving home, that kind of stuff, or they've just been together for a long time and are sort of have lost their va-va-voom. And it doesn't have to be in the bedroom. This is just like
and it is,
right?
Absolutely. And this is my bread and butter. You've just described the majority of my clients. Okay. And the first thing is, okay, like I said earlier, what is it you want? Because if we don't know what we want, we've got nothing to measure whether things have improved against. So first of all, let's work out what you want. Then secondly, do you still love your partner? Some people do, some people don't. And they're just saying things have gone a bit meh because actually it's better than admitting I don't want to be with my partner anymore, because that's scary. That involves an awful lot of change. But if we've established that they still want to be together, they still very much love each other, and they know they've got a future together and they've got all that mapped out, we look at exactly what is going wrong. And one of the first things I will often do is take sex off the table completely. Because most couples come to me and they'll say, I say most couples, invariably I speak with just the woman. If it is a couple, sometimes I speak with women who are on their own, who are looking to get into another relationship. But when it's a couple, it's usually just the woman, although I have worked with couples, and I say to both parties, right, what is it you need? What's missing for you from this relationship? We take sex off the table and we start bringing intimacy back in. And that can be things like take time out to go for a walk. And I'm not just meaning both of you go and walk the dog morning and evening. Go out for a long afternoon walk, drive somewhere. If you've got a dog, take the dog with you, walk in the countryside, walk along the beach, just walk. Maybe get a coffee as you're walking, get an ice cream, whatever it might be. Go and walk and talk. Don't sit at home doing what you normally do. Change your routine. So if your normal Saturdays, we go out for lunch, we have a bottle of wine with our meal, then we go home and we fall asleep on the sofa. And then we wake up and we're feeling a bit meh, because I don't know about you, but if I fall asleep in the middle of the day, come 7 o'clock, I'm like a bear with a sore head.
I hate it.
And that's the worst.
I hate
exactly.
it. Yeah.
So, let's change the routine up. That's obviously not working for you. Let's change it. But let's change it, staying within the comfort zone. So we go out for a walk, or we find whatever they want to do. For some people, it might be go for a swim together, weekend away, whatever it might be. And that's lots of conversations around that. And then it's about, I work with them to say, right, what is it you really want to ask of your partner? What is it you want to say to your partner? How can we have those conversations? How can you frame the conversation so it doesn't feel threatening, so it doesn't feel like you're blaming, so it doesn't feel confrontational? And I work with my clients to help them bring up whatever it is that's on their mind, whatever they want clarity on. And what usually happens, interestingly, is when I say to them, don't even think about having sex for the next 2 or 3 weeks. However, and everyone is different. So for some people, 2 or 3 weeks is forever. And for others, I need to say, don't even think about having sex for the next 6 weeks. Those sorts of things. You take it off the table, guess what? They want more. And then they both start trying to do things to get the other one to break. So you bring the playfulness back into the relationship. You bring back flirting. And I'll say, how about sexting? And I don't mean really graphic sexting, but things like looking forward to seeing you tonight, if you've arranged to go out for dinner perhaps. Looking forward to our walk, where do you fancy going? Or I've seen this place, shall we go here? So you start to build that anticipation that you used to have remember when you were dating? And there would be that excitement. Oh, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? He hasn't said where he's taking me, or she hasn't said where she wants to go. You build that anticipation back in, because a lot of it's the anticipation. When we've been together with somebody for a long time, there's very little anticipation. We know what they like and what they don't like. We know where they're likely to want to go for a meal. We know where they're likely to go and walk the dog. We know all those things. We know what time on a Thursday they're going to go and do their shopping. We know it. We know what time they eat breakfast. We know what time they use the bathroom. It all becomes so routine, and you're like, oh, for goodness sake. We know that they're going to wear that pair of pants on a Friday and that pair of pants on a Sunday.
Yeah, there's no surprises left. There's nothing left.
No surprises. And that's why we end up in this place where we're thinking, oh, God, that's it. And one of the things I work with the couple to do is work out what it is that can surprise them. Now, in my relationship, my partner lives away from home. He, for various reasons, but he managed to find a job at the end of lockdown. We both lost jobs in lockdown. He got a job, but it means he has to work away during the week. Actually, that's created a whole new excitement in our relationship, because now, in the week, of course, he's not about. But pity help him, he gets home on a Friday, and my son had better make sure he's out the house, So it's done wonders for us.
Yeah.
Absolutely done wonders. We've been together 9 years. You do, like you said, you and Owen have been together a long time. You do get stuck in a rut, and particularly when you've got kids and you've got littlies. But trust me, when they're 17 years old, and, oh, for goodness sake, I heard you, that's disgusting. It's not disgusting, it's a healthy relationship, actually. But, you have to be aware of those things, because I don't want to hear my 17-year-old having sex, and he certainly doesn't want to hear his mum having sex. Let's face it. There are some things a child does not need to know.
He doesn't want to even imagine the fact that you might have sex. Never mind you having sex.
Exactly. Oh, the few times he's like, oh, mum, that's just so gross. Of course, that's how it should be. That's absolutely how it should be. But let's do things that change things up in our relationship. So when I say go out for a walk, it is about doing something different. I have something that I sometimes pull out the bag called the A to Z of date night. Work through the alphabet with your partner. Each of you takes turns. So one of you picks something beginning with A, and you arrange a date with that name. And it could be anything from going to watch some amateur drama, or then the next time you might go and play bingo. You've got golf, you've got horse riding, fly a kite, go to the zoo, whatever it might be. But work through the alphabet, taking it in turns to pick something for that day, or for that letter rather. And that works quite well, because you both know you're not going to do the same thing. And yes, you both need to buy into doing things like that. But if you both want to work on your relationship, if you both want to bring that frisson, that excitement back, you'll both go along with it. Some of the date nights you'll have a great time at, and some of them you think, my God, we're not doing that again. You're never going to know if you don't do it. And it gives you the shared experience.
Shared experience, even if it was awful.
Exactly. And what happens then over time is you relax, because you're both having fun, or maybe you're not, but you've got that shared experience. You start to relax. What happens? You start to become more intimate with each other in terms of hand holding, putting your arms around each other, just giving each other a kiss. That glow of getting home and laughing, and you're relaxed. And you've not done the same thing of sitting in front of the TV with a takeaway and whatever happens to be on Netflix. And that that's fine too. But when that becomes the norm,
when that becomes like all you ever do.
Exactly. And it is about making an effort. These things aren't difficult, but you have to make the effort to make changes.
I feel like that is a good note to end on, because you said you've got to put the effort in, folks. So those of you listening, you can't be lazy about this stuff. You can't be lazy about money. You can't be lazy about relationships. You can't be lazy about parental controls with your children. It's actually a brilliant point to really pick up on and end on, to say, like, stop being lazy. Like, really, if we give our, and it's not even like being lazy like it's a wrong and a bad thing. It's like putting the effort into ourselves, isn't it, and our lives, and making our lives magical, rather than just kind of going, oh, why isn't this working? Really,
Exactly.
really important.
Exactly.
Really, really important. Deb, it has been an absolute pleasure. We will put all of your links so that people can find you. What's your website, just in case anyone's listening? They're like, I'm not waiting for this to be produced somewhere with a link underneath it. What's your
Have
website?
a look at deb-morgan.com.
Brilliant. Awesome. I love an easy one to remember. So look for Deb Morgan. You have a membership as well that is, I want to say, crazy accessible. Like, we're not talking super high fees here. I don't know whether you share how much it is or whether you want to.
Actually, I'm just reopening the doors to that. And it's the unmasked membership, because we want to take the mask off and find out. And within that membership, over the course of the year, I share my high ticket program. So that's what I work through with my one-to-one clients. And there's some incredible speakers I have in there as well. We meet every Wednesday, and it's just £40 a month. And you get all of that. You get the opportunity to ask questions.
That is ridiculously
cheap.
There's
a whole load of bonuses in there. There's a group, everything else. But have a look. It's actually, I haven't put it live yet because the doors haven't opened yet. But if you are interested in that, my contact details are on the website. Contact me on social media. I'll send you the link, and you can come and join us on the reopening on the 2nd of November, where I'm planning a masked ball, no less.
This is perfect timing then to have this conversation. So, and if people are listening and it's not, like now, and this is a few months or even a year later, I'm sure there'll be at some point the unmasked membership will be happening.
Just have a look at Work with Deb on the website, and all the details will be under that menu.
Yeah, and I think what's really lovely is it's a very accessible way to start exploring this work and to start exploring what people want without going, oh God, I'm going to have to spend thousands on therapy. It's like so accessible at that price for anyone to go, okay, I'm going to dip my toe in, I'm going to get to know Deb, I'm going to find out, to then go, actually, well, what do you need? Because a lot of us don't know what we need, do we? When we first go, something in my life isn't working, we don't know what we need. So it's a brilliant way to actually dip toe in. And obviously, if people are in they're just like, I need one-to-one and I need to work with you, they can do the same thing, right? They can come to you.
Yeah, and I have, I speak to all my members regularly. They're open to message me, all sorts of things. So I do a Q&A once or twice a month as well. So if they've got any questions, they ask me. So they don't get the one-to-one coaching within the group, but they
can get some hot seat coaching.
Questions. And,
amazing. Yeah. Okay, great. Because I think it's, for people who haven't done any work, it can be quite a scary of like, well, who do I work with? How does it work?
Absolutely.
Who do I do? And it's like so great to be able to get to know you and,
and neither do I expect people to share stuff. I know that this stuff is really personal. So I'm not one of those that goes around the room and says, introduce yourself, tell me why you're here. And you've got 25 other people sitting there, or 30 other people, it's just, that is so scary. And it's scary enough when you've got to do that in the workplace, to have to do that and open up about your relationship. Some people like to share, others don't. I don't force anybody into sharing. If they want to, they can, but that's not a requirement.
People can come in quietly and
you can just sit, you can just listen.
And it's online?
Yeah, all hosted online on Zoom. Great. So it's really, really accessible. 7 o'clock on a Wednesday evening.
Videos off if they don't want to show their face in the beginning, or is it video? Everyone's on
they're in control.
Brilliant. Cool.
And mute me if you think I'm waffling on too much. Just press mute. That's it. You're in total control.
Amazing. Deb, it's been an absolute joy to hear your story and where you come from, and it just even more now I'm like, that's why I resonate with you so much. So thank you for all of your time, and really for spending a couple of hours with me. Everyone these days is so busy, so I'm always in awe of people spending that much time with me to share your story and who you are and also your expertise. We've already had a comment on we've already had 2 comments on there saying fascinating podcast and loving the A to Z. So it's already making a difference for people, which is really special. I always say, I'm happy once I've enjoyed it, and every single person after that, if someone gets some value and gets some help and has their life work better, it's miraculous. So thank you for being part of that. And I hope to speak to you again soon. I'm sure we'll do it again next year. That will be really great.
I'm sure we will. I'd love to.
What else is going on?
Pleasure's been all mine. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye.